Welcome to the Contemporary Music Centre's Salon and our second episode for this winter series of the Salon. For this episode, we have the great pleasure to present a concert by the Fidelio Trio recorded in Boston last year, featuring piano trios by Ann Cleare, Donnacha Dennehy and Kevin Volens. And I'm joined by two-thirds of the Fidelio Trio, Mary Dullea piano and Darragh Morgan violin, for a discussion about these works and much more besides. Darragh and Mary, great to see you. You're in the same room in your home in London, and thanks for joining us. You're in the same room, of course, because you are a married couple, and as I said, two-thirds of the Fidelio Trio, with Tim Gill as your cellist now. But in this recording that we will hear from Boston in 2019, Adi Tal is the cellist that we will enjoy. So we have three works, all commissioned by the trio. Ann Cleare's first piano trio, 93 Million Miles Away, Kevin Volens' third piano trio, Le Tombeau de Regret, and Donnacha Dennehy's Bulb. Darragh, how central is commissioning to what Fidelio is all about?
Well, playing contemporary music is central, so obviously commissioning is a huge part of that. When the trio started, there wasn't such a wide range of new music for piano trio out there that we could identify with. And at the same time, there seemed to be emerging lots of new composers, a new generation, particularly in Ireland. There was a new generation of music making at that time, about 20, 25 years ago. And yeah, it was really important to us to have repertoire created both for us, for our sound, and by people that we love to work with, but also that we're really proud to have pieces written by for us.
Mm-hmm. Mary, are you always trying to push the boundaries of what the piano trio can do, you know, when you're kind of thinking through who you will work with next? I mean, because I suppose, you know, it is considered, and Darragh has said there wasn't much contemporary music repertoire for it when you formed the trio. I mean, the piano trio is sometimes considered by many as being a sort of an old-fashioned ensemble.
Yeah, it depends on how you choose to look at it and whether you see it as more of a kind of a salon afternoon tea sort of background music, playing lots of arrangements of things. And then you have all this incredible, particularly romantic repertoire. I think people who write for us actually also now are in a position to get to know the pieces that have been written for us and what we do. And we're also up for absolutely anything. So, and I mean, we've got three pieces here which have been written for us and approach every possible extreme of the instruments, both in terms of range and color. And with that experience and this wide body of repertoire as well, that we're passionately committed to, whether it's Schubert or Sciarrino, you know, that with that, we're really conscious of sound, how you produce what you do produce, and in collaboration with a composer, always get to this place where hopefully we are doing what they've imagined.
You talked about a range of sounds there, and you know, in the first work we're going to hear, Ann Cleare's 93 Million Miles Away, there really is a range of timbres, and she says about this piece that, you know, she approached the piano as if it was a string instrument. So you don't play on the keyboard at all, Mary, in this work?
Hardly. I mean, it's really interesting, the fact that people are going to see this on a video rather than just hearing it. And I think if you hear it as well, if you take the visual aspect away from it, you're just wondering, where are these sounds coming from? It's almost like taking one aspect of a sound, what that might be, if it's like moving two strings across a bow, and how you can, you know, do something with that. Or like you say, how you actually play with the inside of the piano.
You know, for me, it's a very important piece for us to have in our repertoire because it explores a very other side of the relationship between these instruments and between the player and their own instrument as well, you know, with extended techniques.
We're going to hear from Ann Cleare a little bit of her insights on the work, and then we will hear this wonderful performance from 2019 at the Tufts University in Boston from Fidelio Trio of Ann Cleare's 93 Million Miles Away.
The name of the piece is 93 Million Miles Away. It's my first real piece for piano trio. But I did have to think hard about how to approach it. I actually kind of gave it this title because of how different the two instruments are, the strings and the piano. I guess in trying to deal with that difference, I kind of worked on material, sound material that I thought was similar between the two instruments. So I started with the piano and started to work on the inside strings of the piano. So then I think that brought me a little bit closer to the string instruments, the violin and cello, because I was treating the piano as if it was a string instrument rather than a keyboard instrument. So the title 93 million miles away, it's also related to how far NASA estimate the sun to be from the Earth. So again, just thinking about distant places, you know, a lot about the piece is this idea of distance. Even when things are very close, it still feels like there's so much to go before they can actually be in contact. And then in the piece, I also have these two different sonic worlds. So I was kind of thinking of them as well as a bit like the Earth and the sun, and they're two different things that you're constantly wondering as you're listening to the piece, how far apart they really are.
Ann Cleare's 93 Million Miles Away, performed by the Fidelio Trio. And I'm joined for this episode of The Salon by Darragh Morgan and Mary Dullea from the Fidelio Trio. And the next work we're going to hear is a work by Kevin Volens, also commissioned for the trio, a commission for the trio by RT Lyric FM and premiered at your festival, the Winter Chamber Music Festival in Drumcondra in Dublin. And this third piano trio from Kevin, he titles the Tombeau de Regret. He says, like nearly all my work of the last 30 years, this piece was written without pre-planning and as far as possible without any concept. I began at the beginning and worked to the end. The subtitle of Le Tombeau de Regret refers to Saint-Colombe's beautiful piece for two viols. There's no obvious connection between that piece and my piece, however. So Darragh, Kevin says there's no obvious connection between the piece and Monsieur de Saint-Colombe, and I can't hear any, but as a string player, do you hear any direct connection between your violin part and that viol language of Monsieur de Saint-Colombe?
Well, there's, something very interesting about that is that Kevin likes a very pure type of fiddle playing or string playing in general. And I don't know if that only comes from his interest in viols, or also interest in African music, where he grew up in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. I'm sure it's lots of things. And yeah, I mean, there's elements of the viol in the way I play this piece. It's heavily muted, the violin part, and I do actually use a lighter bow to play it.
It encompasses the whole instrument, and I mean, it is a bit scary when you first open the score and you just see these like lines traversing the pages. But it is the kind of music. So regarding Kevin's music, whether it is this more flowing, really soft, material, this wash of sonority, but not too blurry. I mean, it is very particular what the eventual sound world is supposed to be. But whether it's that, or whether it's more obvious kind of rhythms or playing on intervals that, we also know and love really very much from our first trio CD, which has, the first trio of his that we worked on in there. You're just drawn into this very particular use of the motif and of the bow stroke or of the use of the keyboard. So yes, he presents challenges, but he knows what he's doing. So you just have to work very hard to get it.
So let's enjoy this work by Kevin Volens, his third piano trio, commissioned by RT Lyric FM for the Fidelio Trio, Le Tombeau de Regret, in a performance by the Fidelio Trio from 2019 in Boston. Kevin Volens' Piano Trio number 3, Le Tombeau de Regret, performed there by the Fidelio Trio from the Tufts University in Boston in 2019. And I'm delighted that Mary and Darragh are with me from the trio to discuss these works, and that we have this wonderful live performance recording on tonight's Salon. The final piece of the evening is Donnacha Dennehy's Bulb, an early work, well, not so much an early work, but an older work from Donnacha now at this stage. And Donnacha joined us earlier from his home in the States, where he's part of the music faculty at Princeton University, to share some of his thoughts on this work.
Bulb is a piece I wrote for the Fidelio Trio, and it's a kind of investigation, if you like, a kind of a pulsing, buzzing investigation of the Overtone series, but for a piano trio, which seems like a really unlikely and strange combination for such a thing. And in a weird way, it was a kind of a breakthrough piece for me. It's now 14 years old. And I remember my great friend Bob Gilmore came to Dublin to give a lecture on Vivier, other composers, making, in a way, really straightforward use of the Overtone series. And it was like a eureka moment for me, because I've been thinking about it for years, but had almost been daunted by the complexity of it. And so in this piece then, I just decided I was just going to base it on Overtone series of G and basically pulse through it. And that the violin started actually in the middle of this kind of this spectrum, and the piano way up at the top, because there's loads of choices if you allow, you know, a certain tolerance of almost equal tempered notes up there, and in any case it's pretty inharmonic high up. And gradually they swap roles through the piece. The piano starts to come down, have less choices of notes to sort of fit within a G overtone basis, but at a you know, with some degree of sense tolerance. And then the violin has swap roles with it, and it ends up at the very top. And it's a kind of almost ecstatic journey through that.
Donnacha Dennehy joining us earlier to give us a little bit of insight into his work, Bulb. Mary and Darragh, you know, this work, it's, as Donnacha says, is based on the Overtone series. But of course, you know, we hear that unmistakable Dennehy kind of rhythmic drive, and the intensity builds and builds.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly vibey piece. It goes down like a hit with audiences. I mean, we must have played it over 100 times in concert all around the world, and doesn't matter what continent you're on, people are just like really enthralled by it. But, you know, all pieces I've played by Donnacha or commissioned, you know, I feel the same. They've all got such a Dennehy strong voice. You know, in his violin concerto I recorded, Elastic Harmonic, that's, you know, incredibly strong music. Or even Stamp, the string quartet that I commissioned, again, really just like such strong, cool material, and also likable music, you know, the music you really want to listen to.
We have often actually played it for what might be perceived to be more traditional venues or traditional audiences, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, where they might be getting, I don't know, Schubert and Ravel afterwards, as an example. But you could start with this, because as well, it's, you know, perfect duration. It's about 12 minutes long, and you're immediately, like you said, Evonne, this driving nature to it, but you're presented with this riff that you can absolutely latch onto. And the strings are doing all their crazy stuff with no places to turn, you know, which is also quite a theatrical element to the performance. But I'll never forget the very first time we played it, and we did spend a long time preparing this piece, as any, but this was, you know, we did a lot of work in preparation for the first performance. And there's this incredible sort of sonic collision, almost like a sonic illusion in the middle of the piece. So again, anybody watching, you might see that the piano starts right at the top and gradually moves down the instrument. And the strings are, you know, again, doing all fairly extreme stuff in terms of their own registers and this whole spectral aspect to their sound. But the piano gets to the sort of mid-range of the instrument, and suddenly something happens where it's like, oh, there's something missing. Kind of all of these overtones sort of just get a little bit disturbed by this. And then the piano carries on down and you have this last push to the end. But I'll never forget that kind of, that sort of sonic illusion. I was in this concert hall thinking, oh, what's happened? So it's an incredible use of, sonority and also the natural resonances of the instrument.
Let's see and hear the Fidelio Trio in this performance of Donnacha Dennehy's Bulb from Tufts University in Boston in 2019. Donnacha Dennehy's Bulb, performed there by the Fidelio Trio in that performance from the Tufts University in Boston in 2019. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the CMC Salon. Great to see you, and thanks again for sharing this wonderful performance.
Thanks, Evonne.
Thank you.